Hey guys and gals, it's Tripl-L, and now let's talk about Little Witch Academia episode 14. Man, let me just preface this with saying, every time I sit down to watch Little Witch Academia, especially after episode 8, every time I sit down to watch this show, I always come out of it with very colorful opinions. And especially for me, relatively compared to every other show that I cover on this channel and the one that I covered before it ended, Mobile Suit Gundam, like Little Witch Academia draws out a lot of emotional attention from me. Like, it's very emotionally draining. Like, Little Witch Academia knows how to really just get me in all the right ways. It bothers me to such a degree, and this episode continues that trend. Now, again, I'm using like words that could sound really negative, but it's actually all for a worthwhile experience. And this video covering this episode 14, it's going to revolve a lot around the logic that's happening in Little Witch Academia right now with the introduction of the new character Croix and her system and her alignment and everything, and just where the characters are. We're going to be talking about the story of Little Witch Academia for a little bit as well in this video, so yeah, if you're in for that, let's just start. First off though, before I get into the hardcore breaking down of what's going on, like the title of the video is the logic of the SSS system. Before we get to that, let's just talk about the part that I really enjoyed a lot. It's the part where Akko goes and she like tries to smooth things out with the fairies, and then she ends up becoming their spokesperson, and then she ends up becoming the general secretary. At which point Holbrook says, "Oh, you're really moving up." That was the funniest bit. Oh man, that was great. Oh, that was hilarious. That made me chuckle out loud. Seeing Akko there and defending the rights of the fairies, and then going up to Diane and telling her, "You don't understand us." It's all very interesting. That was a very tense moment. And truthfully, I have my opinions on who I side with in that particular matter, but you know, there's a lot of fallacies going on in here. There's a lot of really shady play going on in here. So actually, I should talk about that too, because that's worthwhile talking about. Give me a second. I need to think about how to structure this. Okay, I got the idea. I don't want to spend too much time on it because this is not the point of the video. There's something bigger that I want to talk about, so I can't let this segment go on for more than 3 minutes. So we'll just quickly talk about the Akko, the fairies, and Holbrook and Diana in that situation, because there's something worthwhile there. First off, let's talk about Diana. Diana gets in there. She's making demands using the fairies' livelihood as hostage, their place to live. And you know, overall, that's a very fair, it's a fair negotiational tactic, but it completely overlooks the fact that the fairies might be in a worse situation than Diana realizes. And then Akko points it out by saying, like, this girl, she gets unfair treatment compared to you guys. And it kind of sucks that Akko has to play that card, but she's actually making a really good point. Diana is, in that one particular instance, coming down and saying to return to the status quo because otherwise they have nowhere to go. And that's pretty rough. When you think about strikes, it's specifically because they don't want to return to the status quo. And people could say, like, you're about to lose your job if you don't go back to work. But then what's the point of the strike, right? No, it's because, truthfully, the witches can't do anything without the fairies. So that negotiational tactic is just really scummy. And Akko is probably in the right when she says to Diana that she's very stuck up and she's looking down on people. And that is probably a character trait that Diana does innately have, although she doesn't express it in a very visible way, but it came out in that particular moment, and her just opting to leave the situation kind of reinforced that general approach. Next up, Holbrook. Holbrook is very interesting in this episode, and someone in the previous video pointed out something about Holbrook's characterization, that she's willing to go with the flow of most things. And yeah, actually, you're right. I was thinking that in the last episode, but I didn't talk about it because I didn't think it was that important. I thought I was kind of wrong about it, but you're right. I can't recall the name of the person who commented it, but Holbrook is very much a person who goes with the flow. But I really enjoyed the segment where she just tells Akko, "Good job on climbing through the ranks." Like, she's like a nice little old lady. Like, how could I not appreciate that? But that's a very good point. Still, she's going with the flow, but that character trait is what allows her to let some of the things slide. So, overall, it's unfortunate that that's her character, but that character is the one that's enabling the rest of the stuff to happen with Akko in a relatively correct way. So, we'll have to take the good with the bad on this one for that particular character. But, actually, and this is going to tie into the theme now that I think about it, Little Witch Academia presents characters who really, at some points you can't really agree with, even though you might agree with their end goal, or you might agree with how they cause a situation to kind of unfurl. So, I'll give Little Witch Academia a point for that. But now, I think that's all I really wanted to talk about with that segment of those 4 characters, or 3 characters. I talked Akko, Diana, and the headmistress. Yeah, okay, good. Let's move on from that. The next point that I want to talk about is specifically all about the SSS system, because it's a very interesting little thing that's popping up in this episode. Before I get into that though, I want to say this, and it's Little Witch Academia, truthfully, I don't think has a very good story. And when I say that, I mean that when you look at the story and you look at the way things unfold and you look at the way that the narrative emphasizes certain qualities, it feels kind of put together. It feels really hackneyed, especially when you consider that a lot of the plot for this series as a whole came in very late in the series. It came in around episode 10 with the Blue Moon apparition. That's where things really kick into gear. Every episode before that is enjoyable to some degree, but they don't really do anything for the overall story. At some points, character development just seems a little bit inconsistent. But the thing with Little Witch Academia is that, truthfully, I think this series is less about the story and more about the themes presented within the story. And what that ends up doing, in my opinion, is you get the situation where the story compromises itself in order to put the themes at the forefront. Because let's face it, at the end of the day, Little Witch Academia is very engaging. I can tell this from my own emotional reaction, and I can tell it from some of the people that comment in the videos. They really like this series. It's very engaging. It's a very engaging series. But the world that is set up to house the themes that Little Witch Academia presents, and the themes are the biggest part of the engagement. Like in terms of themes, the themes execute really well. But again, the story has to compromise for it. So the things that justify the themes being there seem pretty weak in comparison. And one of the big ones that I can just call out on immediately is the whole idea that magic is useless. That whole idea is just fundamentally stupid. Okay, like when you have a person who can grow ears, rabbit ears, onto her head, and she has nerve endings attached to her head from the ears so that she can feel pain when those ears are yanked. That's like genetic modification on an incredible level. That's way beyond anything technology can do, and that's like maybe what technology is starting to do now. And when you have that kind of methodology being applied to the series, you can tell it's specifically because they need that conflict to happen. It doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense, that premise of technology is winning out over magic and magic is useless. That's just something that you have to accept going into the story of Little Witch Academia as a given, right? But that given is really inconsistent. It doesn't make a lot of logical sense. And then Little Witch Academia also has the humorous aspects to it, and unfortunately we have to take the humor seriously because it goes into a lot of the point of drama or the point of contention in an episode might be relegated to a gag or might be point away to a gag. And we saw it with this episode with Ursula being forced into going to do hard labor because, as we saw, the old witches just are too frail to do that, right? Because they can't use magic to pull those things along. So that point, Ursula was set up to talk to Akko in this episode, and she was effectively blocked by a gag. And again, I don't want to speak badly of Little Witch Academia as a whole. It's just when it comes to dealing with the story itself, because the story is the framework by which the characters and the themes express themselves, the story ends up being easy to poke holes at if you were to really sit down and try to do it. But if you move past the stories and just engage with the material that's being presented to you in an episode, the themes and the interactions that happen in the episode, it becomes a much worthwhile discussion. But it's that underlying story or the foundation of this series just doesn't work, because at the end of the day, Little Witch Academia is a show that's a lot about fun and about like this kind of visual expression of just fun things. Like the show's visual style is really on point. So, you know, when you have that, we come in to this episode where we have Croix. Look, it is easy to see that Croix is the bad guy here. It is very easy to see with the things that Trigger drops in this episode. The mechanical fairy. The fact that the girls or the witches don't know where the fairies got the initial, the initial barriers to prevent magic. You know, there's a lot of things being dropped in this episode that should tell you that Croix is the antagonist before we even get to the reveal at the end. Truthfully, the moment that Lot says that fairy is like a machine, everyone should be thinking, oh wait, there's a teacher that just came in that has machines. Look, that is ridiculous to me. They better get to that point in like the next 2 episodes. Lot better follow up on that idea, because that is the biggest indicator right there. And what's worse, the girls saw the first fairy that turned into a monster, and then later on there's a second fairy that shows up with the other fairies. I'm pretty sure they happen in sequence. Like, no one's asking that question. That's kind of suspicious, right? Now the thing is, with Croix, like what I was saying about Holbrook, the thing about Holbrook having these negative aspects, but ultimately her aspects work out for the story, for the story of Little Witch Academia. When you have Croix, it's a very interesting thing, because Croix has technology. She's bringing Magetronics, something like that. And overall, you know, looking at just that technological marvel, that's pretty cool. You know, there's nothing bad with that. I think, yeah, cool. A smartphone that can do magic. Of course it's going to be a smartphone, because that's what modern means to these people, right? But you look at the smartphone, it's like, yeah, okay, so one tap and you can do some magic. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. You made a machine be able to replicate the magical abilities of a human. Okay, cool. Machines can replicate the mechanical ability of humans nowadays, so that's whatever. But then, you know, it gets painted in a bad light. See, the technology itself isn't that bad. I think it's very useful. I think technology is all about efficiency, and this technology, without a doubt, makes efficiency a thing. It brings efficiency to the forefront. And it's unfortunate that the reason that the narrative is painting this technology as bad is because the character that's using it has some ill intent. It's unfortunate because we might end up getting into a narrative where they're saying that technology is bad and that the original way, or like just magic, is more fun when you can do it yourself. And it kind of takes away the point of what technology is. And the truth of the matter is that most likely you could have a situation where Andrew and his father see this little smartphone and think, oh yeah, magic is cool again. And it's like, it's everything that smartphone can do, most likely the witches could do as well. But it won't matter, because they'll just see the smartphone and they'll think, oh yeah, this is how magic should be. It should be in a smartphone. And truthfully, like, ask yourself, do you think that kind of narrative is impossible given the characterization that we got from Andrew's father? And the thing is, I understand how business works. I understand how engineers versus businessmen think. I know that at the end of the day, businessmen don't understand, or people in general don't understand, the technical aspects of any given profession. So you have to dumb it down to them. And unfortunately, smartphone is the language that everyone understands, is hip, is efficient, is the new thing, is the beacon of modernness. So, you know, it's unfortunate, because I could see us going into a narrative where everyone's going to accept the smartphone as the rejuvenation of magic, even though really all it's doing is changing what was initially a word in a wand wave to a tap. Yeah, I don't know, man. But now going back to what makes technology useful, and again, the good aspect of technology here is that we have Croix, who is very techno-savvy. She understands how the world works. She understands how research institutes works. She understands about the government subsidy. She understands just a lot of stuff. She understands the modernism of the world. And I think overall her idea of the SSS system is awesome, because she makes a really good point. Like, the way she explains the SSS system is that tower is always giving off magic. It's always doing a one-to-one conversion from the ley lines, and then that magic is always being radiated. It's not being radiated when someone needs it. It's not like the power grid. The power grid pumps up more electricity whenever it needs to meet the demand that people are, whenever it needs to meet the demand of people using the system, it ramps up. But the tower stays consistently at a fixed rate. What that ends up happening is that you have a lot of radiation coming from the tower, and that radiation isn't always used. Having the batteries, which is what the SSS system is effectively, having the batteries to collect that excess magic, especially magic that's not used overnight, is ridiculously smart. I didn't know the system worked like that, and that's actually super smart. That makes sense in terms of energy efficiency. That is the best idea I've ever heard of when it comes to this series. That is so cool. But then here's the problem. You know, in the real world, electric companies, they can form monopolies really easily because energy is something that everyone needs. You control energy, you control people's livelihood, and you saw that in this episode. So I think the problem here is that they're giving all that power to one person. And yeah, the batteries are really cool. It's cool to have those batteries because now they can use energy that they wouldn't use normally. I think that's a really great idea. But again, Croix presents herself as an antagonist. So unfortunately, this technology is going to be demonized. Unless Aqua at the end kind of reconciles magic and technology, which might happen, but we really have to see what kind of route Little Witch Academia is going to go. We'll probably have a pretty good idea of where we're going by episode 18. So overall, in terms of the SSS system, it works really well. I think it's a really great idea. I think, yeah, that makes a total amount of sense. Now this video is going on for longer. I rambled on a bit too much than I thought I was gonna. But let's take 1 second to talk about one more character, because I never thought I'd be even slightly friendly with this character. And I'm specifically talking about Finneran. I think that's her name. We'll just call her Finneran. She's opposed to the SSS system, and this is again the thing with Little Witch Academia, that you could have characters who ultimately help out the story even though they're doing it for the wrong reasons, or they have negative character traits like Hallbrook and Croix. We have Finneran, and you know, Finneran is opposed to this, so as a viewer, I'm on her side because it's like, I know where this is going, I'm not into this. You know, Croix is kind of like, Finneran, I like it. You know, it's the whole idea, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And unfortunately, at this moment in time, Finneran is my friend here because Finneran doesn't like what's going on. And because of that, she's more likely to look at Croix with a more kind of critical eye. She's more likely to say, well, you know, it's interesting that all these things went wrong and then you just happened to be here to solve our problem. And we know that's the case because she had the little machine goblin planted in that whole group. But yeah, you know, Finneran's not doing it for the right reasons of thinking, oh, you know, this is suspicious. She's doing it for the reason of like, hey, this is against tradition this, tradition that, blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh man, you know, I appreciate that you're kind of on the same side as the viewer here, but you're still doing it for like the really shitty reasons that I really can't get behind. Truthfully, it'd be nice if there was a compromise of using old magic, teaching magic, the basics of magic, and then teaching technology along with it. But unfortunately, we're getting into a morally dubious plot. Like, we can't have those kind of easy lines. And truthfully, I'm okay with not having those easy to make distinctions in the characters. I like that Hallbrook's ultimately has some negative qualities that justifies her behavior. I like the Finneran is going up against Croix on the viewer's side because of her negative aspects. I ultimately like that. I like that Croix brought in a lot of technology, even though she might just be the biggest a-hole in the world. You know, who knows? I appreciate that the characters are doing good things in the story due to their negative aspects, because that feels a bit more fresh, you know? It feels a bit more fresh. So overall, I really enjoy that aspect of Little Witch Academia, and it really comes back to the idea Little Witch Academia does really well with its themes and characters, and then the story that's under it is just there to establish the themes and the characters. So guys, this ended up being a 20-minute video, but this episode did give a lot to talk about, and you know, there's still a lot more to talk about in this episode, but these are the main topics I wanted to tackle. Again, I am on Finneran's side, technically, against the SSS system. I think people should keep an eye on this. I think Croix is a danger. Like, she's clearly a danger, and Lot Lot, please. You realize, you even said it. It's like a machine. Come on, make the connection. Whew. Who knows what's gonna happen? Anyway, let's see. Any other little things? Oh, the broom. The broom is in Japan. That broom that Aqua released way back when, it was in the newspaper article. It's going through Japan, so maybe it's gonna be back here pretty soon. Other things to talk about. The fairies are cute. Yeah, the fairies are cute. Oh, I remember now. The foreshadowing we got back in the episode with the blue moon apparition. Let's bring them back up. Let's bring those screens up. So here you see the fairy. So this is the riot that just happened in this episode. So now we've gotten quite a few of the images going through here. So now we know that every image that came after these two is actually going to happen. So that means we're going to see people throwing Molotov cocktails, and we're going to see a town just set ablaze. So guys, exciting, and we know what Croix is going to do. She's going to destroy the world. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching. Let's end it there. Croix is on her way to world domination because now she has effectively 5 days. Well, you know, every day that passes, she's gonna have half a day's worth of magic all to herself. What a lady. She's gonna be an interesting antagonist. And she made Ursula sad. So guys, let's end it there. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I hope you have a very great day. Leave comments down below if you have anything to say about this episode.